What is it to be Irish? To be the people of the land, poets, writers, musicians, fighters, warriors, people steeped in history, a history that is renowned throughout the world. Millions of people come here, or at least thousands, every year to investigate the very culture in which we are brought up in. But how did the Irish get on in America? Is it true that the famine turned them into criminals? Really?
In George Fitzgerald's book, I See You, Pitbull, Do You See Me? There is a line that the fictional character Pitbull says this is not Cork Row in the Lower East Side of New York. There are no Cork gangsters here.
The book I See You, Pitbull, Do You See Me? Follows the life of the fictional character growing up in the tough streets of Finglas, Dublin.
No backstory as to why Pitbull makes that remark about Cork gangsters living in New York.
The explanation could only be, he heard it from Mr. Pickwick, the Cork man that was nicknamed Finbar of Cork.
Saint Finbar served as Bishop of Cork and was the abbot of a monastery in present-day Cork. He is the patron saint of the city and of the Diocese of Cork. Finbar resided in Temple Martin, close to Bandon. He was the offspring of a talented artisan originally hailing from Galway. He learned in Ossory, which roughly matches today's County Kilkenny.
When Finbar's father settled in Cork, he married the daughter of the king. The king was enraged.
They were sentenced to death.
They were to die by fire. However, in what could only be described as miraculous, the heavens opened and put out the fire. The eyewitnesses saw it as an act of God, and they were set free.
A child was born from this union, and they returned to Gauguin-Barra, where the boy was baptized Lewin or Lochan. When he was 7 years old, 3 clerics of Munster, returning from a pilgrimage to Leinster, happened to stop at the house of Imogen. They admired the boy for the grace of the Holy Spirit that seemed to them to shine in his face, and were allowed by his parents to take him away to be educated. He later became Finbar of Cork.
A completely compelling story, don't you agree? The fictional character called Happy Dungarvan in the book that I've wrote, in the series of Pitbull, Happy Dungarvan, she calls Mr. Pickwick, who is from Cork, Finbar of Cork. And for that purpose, and no other reason, like happenstance just entered into my brain, I researched the real Finbar of Cork.
Monasteries were founded by Saint Finbar, as the city grew into a Viking trading port, thriving through medieval times and the 18th century butter trade. However, this growth masks severe underlying poverty, particularly in West Cork, which led to a catastrophic population drop.
The Great Famine, 1845 to 1850, severely impacted County Cork, one of the most affected regions in Ireland.
From 1846 to 1850, more than 113,000 individuals perished in Cork. Skibbereen gained global notoriety for the vast extent of suffering.
West Cork, Skibbereen, known as the capital of the Cranberries, located by the river on the wild Atlantic Way. It has a population of under 3,000 people and serves as a major hub for tourism and agriculture, famous for its colourful streets, rich history and nearby rivers. However, it is one of the towns that was severely affected, as was said, by what was known as the Great Hunger.
Cork City became inundated with starving refugees,
resulting in significant death tolls from famine and illness, and so, many fled to America. The Cork people, along with their neighbors Kerry, left on the coffin ships for America. The population of Kerry dropped roughly by 19% to 25% due to starvation, disease, and mass emigration.
West Kerry, particularly the Dingle Peninsula, was severely affected, with some areas losing up to 40% to 50% of their population due to extreme poverty, isolation, and total dependence on the failed potato crop.
The Irish famine not only changed the course of Irish history, but it had a huge impact on the American one also.
America would be affected so much by them that they would be known as the first immigrants to be involved in organised crime. In England, in the 1880s, when the word organised crime was used, it was also referring to the Irish. So the ultimate question is this: did New York corrupt the Irish? Or did the Irish corrupt New York? What was the New York that they entered in the 1800s?
The Irish victims of the famine made their home in what was called the Five Points in New York.
The Five Points was generally defined as being bound by Center Street to the west, the Bowery to the east, Canal Street to the north, and Park Row to the south. The Five Points gained notoriety as a densely populated, disease-ridden, crime-infested slum that existed for over 100 years. It was said to be one of the worst neighborhoods in American history. It was predominantly Irish.
Thousands of stories told in human lives. That's what history, and the remarkable thing about history is the tapestry of all human life connected together. Really, forming a culture, a language, a body of people, sandwiched between dates on a calendar called time.
Between 1840 and 1860, nearly 2 million Irish people emigrated, with a massive influx arriving in New York. By 1855, Irish-born residents made up over 25% of Manhattan's population.
In New York, the Irish are the second largest non-Hispanic white ethnic group, with over 2 million people claiming Irish ancestry, making it one of the states with the highest Irish populations outside Boston, which is widely considered the most Irish city in America. In New York City, people of Irish descent have large communities in areas like Woodlawn in the Bronx.
The origin of organised crime, you don't have to go any further. You'll find the roots of it all right here among the Irish. When the Irish left Ireland, obviously, they found themselves in the Five Points. It's already been documented. Now, between people that study crime, historians, philosophers, psychologists, all types of people, have all contributed to the facts of the complexities of why these people behave the way they did. Because when we use words like organised crime, Irish, New York, it conjures up a sort of imagery that's in a way acceptable, that we see these people in this particular portrait that's already painted. But however, in saying that, that's not the reality. The reality is they were extremely savage. Now we come into deeper complexities as to why people that had left the west of Ireland, Cork, Kerry, predominantly Kerry, Cork, Kerry, Limerick, Mayo, all the way up to probably Donegal, all the way around that part of Ireland, and even in further fields, inland. And yet when they arrive in New York in the Five Points, they're basically converted into this ferocious, vicious people. As the question has been asked, did New York corrupt the people, or did the people corrupt New York? And here's the question. Most people believe, who have studied this, that these are, and their behaviour was a direct result from the horrendous experience they had during the famine years. Let me put it to you plainly. I don't believe that. I believe the famine victims that arrived in New York were met by a city that was already filled and controlled by Irish gangsters in 1845.
The Irish Gang, the 40 Thieves, were formed in 1825.
They are said to be the first known and oldest New York City criminal gang. The thieves consisted primarily of Irish immigrants and Irish Americans who terrorized the Five Points neighborhood of 19th-century Manhattan. Another criminal gang named the 40 Thieves, which had no criminal ties to the New York gang, was formed in London, England in 1828.
Consistent information that comes forward is always saying that these gangs were all basically, they emerged from the famine, the Irish famine, and landed there, became gangsters in America. But however, as we can see clearly, that in 1825, the 40 Thieves, and later, a year or two later, in the 1830s, the Dead Rabbits, these were not gangs that were formed out of some catastrophic, horrendous experience in their native land of Ireland. These were not victims of the famine. They were 20 years too early for that. So what I'll put to you is this, is that the victims of the famine in 1845 and Black 47, when they arrived in New York, they arrived in a city that was ruled and dominated by Irish gangsters. The second question has to be asked is that during the famine years, the boats really sailed from Cork around that particular part of Ireland along the west. But yet, if these gangsters were established in 1825, what year did they arrive there at? Because they were noted to be English-speaking people. They were not like the Kerryonians and Plug Uglies and Dead Rabbits, who were native-speaking people. The 40 Thieves were known to be English-speaking, which basically points the finger to the fact they were from Dublin. And if they were, and in their 20s, they would have left Dublin in the 1800s. In 1803 and 1806, the boats that left for New York, one of the ports was Dublin. I think, stand to be corrected, in 1803, 26 vessels sailed from Dublin to New York.
The 40 Thieves, under Edward Coleman's leadership, focused on muggings, theft, and robberies, and they were frequently employed to threaten voters or safeguard dishonest politicians. The Kerryonians, another early Irish gang established in the same year as the 40 Thieves, are said to be the second oldest criminal organization in New York City. And along with other Irish gangs, they ruled the streets of the Lower East Side 20 years before the Irish famine. When we contemplate the journey the Irish had, from escaping famine to watching loved ones die, the sea, and entering a country with nothing but rags, not even the language of the natives. All the gangs, the Dead Rabbits, or Roach Guards, the 40 Thieves, Kerryonians, Shirt Tails, and Chichesters. Later, the gangs took their names from the factories located in their areas, such as the Gas House Gang, which was named after the enormous gas tanks found on 20th Street and 1st Avenue. The Potashes, directed by Red Shamian. The earlier gangs fought not only against the Bowery Boys, but each other. In the 1850s, the Irish immigrants from County Cork, fleeing the aftermath of the Great Famine, were a significant part of the massive influx of people into New York City, particularly in the notoriously overcrowded slums of the Five Points neighborhood in the 6th Ward. This part of the 5 Points around Baxter Street was so filled up with Cork people, it became known as Cork Row. Cork Row was a term used to describe specific, densely packed Irish housing in New York City, notably associated with immigrants from Cork. Neighborhoods, in addition to 5 Points, Irish, including those from Munster, which includes Cork, are heavily populated neighborhoods on the Lower East Side. Dickens portrayed the residents as surrounded by vice and misery, and described them as a mix of thieves, vagabonds, murderers, and burglars. Grim atmosphere. He depicted the area as a place of absolute destitution, noting all that is loathsome, drooping, and decayed is here.
Another point to clear up here is that Dickens wrote American Notes in 1842, and he described the place where the famine victims would end up going as horrendously thriving criminal neighbourhood filled with Irish. The very fact is that he called it, well, part of the neighbourhood was called Cork Row. So basically it was an Irish dominated criminal neighbourhood where the famine victims found themselves. So here, yes, the famine did not, under no circumstance, convert these ordinary people into absolute criminals. They were already living those lives. The 40 Thieves, as we said, was established way back in 1825. Here's the question: did New York corrupt the Irish, or did the Irish corrupt New York? And did the Irish corrupt the Irish in New York?
George G. Foster, the author of New York by Gaslight, 1850, a prominent journalist, Foster described the 5 Points as the great central ulcer of wretchedness, the very rotting skeleton of civilization. He depicted the area as a place of profound moral degradation, reeking everywhere with dirt and filth, filled with desperate vagabonds, and dark, subterranean dives.
The infamous gang leader Old Smoke's real name was John Morrissey. He was an Irish politician, bare-knuckle boxing champion, and criminal. He became a bare-knuckle boxer, challenging Yankee Sullivan, who was then recognized as the American boxing champion. Though Yankee Sullivan beat Morrissey up, the referee declared Morrissey the winner due to his not partaking in the onlooker brawl that happened near the end of the match. He became a professional gambler, owning gambling houses in New York City in the 1850s and 1860s. He was the leader of the notorious Dead Rabbits.
Morrissey was born in Templemore, County Tipperary, Ireland, on February 12, 1831. A few years later, somewhere in 1833, his parents emigrated to the United States and settled near Troy, New York. He had 7 sisters as he was the only son of his parents. County Tipperary is a county in Ireland. It is in the province of Munster and the southern region. That was established in the early 13th century, shortly after the Norman invasion. It is Ireland's largest inland county and shares a border with 8 counties, more than any other. Morrissey's father, Timothy, worked as a laborer. And John held on to his birthright, because once he became involved in Democratic politics in New York City, he developed a rivalry with William Poole, also known as Bill the Butcher. Poole was the leader of the rival Bowery Boys, who were enforcers for the Know Nothing Party, and a boxer.
Gangs of New York is a 2002 grand historical drama movie directed by Martin Scorsese, inspired by Herbert Asbury's 1928 book The Gangs of New York. The movie features Leonardo DiCaprio, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Cameron Diaz, accompanied by Jim Broadbent, John C. Reilly, Henry Thomas, and Brendan Gleeson in supporting roles. Daniel Day-Lewis plays Bill Cutting, who is based on the real Bill the Butcher. Bill the Butcher, much like the fictional character played by Daniel Day-Lewis, was a well-known gang leader and pugilist. Poole was frequently involved in fights, brawls, and other confrontations. The New York Daily Times reported the following on October 23, 1851. A brutal outrage in Broadway. We learned that at an early hour yesterday morning, 2 noted pugilists entered Florence's Hotel, corner of Broadway and Howard Street, and without any provocation seized the barkeeper and beat his face to a jelly. It appears that Thomas Heyer, William Poole, and several others entered the above hotel, and while one of the party held Charles Owens, the barkeeper, by the hair of his head, another of the gang beat him in the face to such an extent that his left eye was completely ruined and the flesh of his cheek mangled in the most shocking manner. Poole's Bowery Boys, whom he often sent to terrorize immigrants. Poole and the Bowery Boys were a de facto extension of the Know Nothings, a nativist and militantly anti-Catholic political party. According to the New Orleans True Delta, the purpose of the Know Nothings was twofold, part religious, part political. and the ends aimed at the disenfranchisement of adopted citizens and their exclusion from office and perpetual war upon the Catholic religion. In other words, he hated the Irish.
In 1854, a fight was arranged between Morrissey, Old Smoke, and Poole, which Poole won. Morrissey plotted revenge, and on February 25, 1855, recently fired NYPD patrolman Louis Baker and Jim Turner, who were allegedly acting as enforcers for Morrissey, shot Poole in the leg and chest at Stanwix Hall, a bar on Broadway near Prince, at that time a center of the city's nightlife. The New York Daily Times reported on February 26, 1855, the following. Terrible shooting affray in Broadway, Bill Poole fatally wounded, the Morrissey and Poole feud, renewal of hostilities, several persons severely wounded. Broadway, in the vicinity of Prince and Houston Streets, was the scene of an exciting shooting affair about 1 a.m. yesterday, which is but a repetition of a similar occurrence that transpired a few weeks ago under Wallack's Theater between Tom Heyer, Louis Baker, Jim Turner, and several other noted pugilists. Several days after the shooting, on March 8, 1855, Poole died in his home on Christopher Street at the age of 33. And for a time, the war was over, and the Irish took more control. Bill the Butcher's last words were, "Goodbye boys, I die a true American."
The Irish would rise, would go to places that would be probably unimaginable for the people that had ended up on those coffin ships. Remember this, they came from a place where they were under the tyranny of the British, starving, watching people eating grass, dying, going on that journey all across the Atlantic in coffin ships, only to find themselves in a place that Charles Dickens more or less described as hell. But the Irish have a spirit, they have a determination, they have an ability to overcome. And maybe one day for those Irish that left Ireland in the hope of a better day, maybe they'll go all the way to the top, even to the presidency, to become the President of the United States of America. The Irish story